For athletes involved in sports like boxing, football, hockey, and others, concussions are a major risk. They can also be hard to detect. Andrew David sustained a few concussions playing varsity hockey at the University of Waterloo, and that's what led him to found Head First, a biotechnology startup that is developing rapid tests that can quickly detect a concussion from saliva. For more on how this is going to help athletes going forward, we're joined this morning by Andrew, who's the co-founder and CEO of Head First. Welcome to the show.
Hello, good morning. Thanks for having me.
I've heard this described a couple different ways, but I'd be curious to know, how do you describe the tests, how they work?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I like to describe it is very similar to a COVID-19 rapid test, right? We call it the COVID-19 rapid test for concussion screening. So once the brain suffers a concussion, biomarkers leak through the blood-brain barrier and into our bodily fluids. So once you suffer from a concussion, you would spit into a receptacle. From there, we put it through a saliva pretreatment process, and then you would drop a handful of drops onto our test strip.
It seems so obvious and so simple, yet we haven't seen it done before. How are concussions currently detected in professional sports?
Absolutely. So in professional sports, it all depends on really where you are at in the world, along with the actual level of professional sports as well. So right now, the main tests that exist are subjective questionnaires, right? So for example, if an athlete suffers a hit to the head, they'll be taken out of play and they'll be asked approximately how much time was left on the score clock, what the score of the game is, where you're from. They'll make you say the months of the year backwards and time you. So it's a lot of these subjective questionnaires that exist today.
Well, what I've also learned from both current and past NHL players is they memorize those answers so that when they're asked those questions, they know the answers already so that they can get back on the ice and play. This would avoid any of that.
Absolutely. So that's the whole point of our device, is to make sure that from an objective standpoint, there's no way around it. If you have the presence of that concussion biomarker, you should be taken out for further treatment.
Boy, we're just showing our viewers right now some hits from football players in particular, and you can't see those hits without thinking about what's happening to their brains. You played varsity hockey, you've had concussions. I'm curious, what took you from the concussion stage to wanting to create Head First?
Absolutely. So I played, hockey at a high level ever since I was young, and it wasn't just at university where I was exposed to concussions. I think my first one was probably around 15 years old, and I'm a big guy. I'm 6'5", 225. Concussions weren't something I came across quite often because I took on that role of big hits, fights, and being quote unquote the goon, right? Mm-hmm. So from a young age I was exposed to them. And then at university, I have a scientific background. I dove into a lot of literature out there and research on concussion biomarkers. And I said, hey, we could really solve a problem for a lot of people, not just athletes to know, but the healthcare professionals also involved in concussion testing that aren't really satisfied with the tests that we have now.
I love this from the medical point of view, but I'm also going to tap into your knowledge as a high-level athlete as well. We know that there is a lot of pressure from coaches, from trainers to get back on the field, on the ice, on the court. Something like this makes it almost impossible to deny the presence of a concussion. So how will this change both high level, I guess really any level of sports, when it comes to acknowledging and treating properly a concussion?
Absolutely. So a lot of people, when they think of, if Sidney Crosby is in Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals, right, and he gets a blow to the head, they might want him to stay into play. So obviously that discussion will always be there. But at the same time, there's a lot of statistics and research out there that show that if you don't detect the concussion early on, this can lead to delaying your healing process and potentially take you out of the game for a longer period of time, costing the team money and also performance, and some of their top athletes are out of the game. So by providing this test, it really gives the healthcare professionals, the coaches, the athletes, a greater range of tools for them to use. So we don't just have the subjective questionnaires and the balance tests and the eye tracking testing, but we also have now, from a chemical standpoint in the body, has something happened in order to take someone out for a concussion.
Well, I am not 6'5", and I am not a goon, but I also have had 2 very serious concussions. So I find this really fascinating. Andrew David, CEO of Head First, thank you.
Thank you very much.
If you liked that video, make sure to subscribe to the Your Morning YouTube feed, where you can find all kinds of new content posted every weekday morning.